next panel discussion titled "The Quest for Europe's Digital Strategic Autonomy, Where and How Should It Lead?" I am really delighted to introduce and welcome our great speakers. Mr. Bart Groothuis, Member of the European Parliament. Mr. Tadeusz Chomicki, Ambassador for Cyber and Tech Affairs at the Security Policy Department of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Poland. Ms. Lorena Boix Alonso, Director of Digital Society, Trust and Cybersecurity at the DG Connect of the European Commission. And Ms. Liga Rozentale, Senior Director, European Cybersecurity Policy, Microsoft. We are also trying to connect Mr. Luigi Rebuffi, who should be with us any second. This discussion will be hosted by Professor Paul Timmers, Research Associate at the Oxford University, Professor of the European University Cyprus, and a long friend of Cybersec, and also a new member of our program committee. Paul, welcome, and over to you.
Yes, hello. I hope that I can be heard. Thank you very much. I think we can start this panel. If you don't hear, do you hear me, Liga? Yep, good. Excellent. Okay, we get started with the panel. Thank you very much. After a little delay, let's jump right into the topic of strategic autonomy, a topic that's very hot in the discussions in Europe, in Brussels, but I know also in other parts in Europe, in the other capitals and across the Atlantic, and implicitly actually in many other places in the world, up to and including Beijing. Now, my name is Paul Timmers. I will be moderating this panel. I'm very pleased and very honored that I can do that with excellent and people with a high reputation. We'll have Ambassador Chomicki, we'll have Secretary General Rebuffi, we'll have Senior Director Liga Rozentale, Member of European Parliament Bart Groothuis, I hope he can sign in, and Director Lorena Boix. Now, as a very short introduction about, first of all, the choreography of this panel, what we'll do is each of the panelists will have 5 minutes to give their take on strategic autonomy. And then we will have some discussion with questions and also the possibility for you to submit questions into the chat. And I hope we will have enough time to deal with various questions that are coming in, and I encourage you to actively participate. Now, the topic of this panel is the quest for Europe's digital strategic autonomy. And that word quest is quite nice because that calls up something like an image of searching for the Holy Grail. And to some extent, there is a Holy Grail aspect in it. People have been discussing about strategic autonomy over the past few years very intensely in Europe, for sure, but also, as I said, more widely. There have been many discussions about how do you define strategic autonomy. What does it mean really in today's world? I would say very briefly, we are talking here about strategic autonomy as a means to realize and to safeguard sovereignty. Now, we'll get more from the speakers about that. What we are looking for in this debate is also to try to get a bit of a better idea on, so where do we move with digital strategic autonomy? And how do we move towards the kind of strategic autonomy that we aspire, in particular that, for example, is aspired in Europe, and more particularly also in the field of cybersecurity, being at the Cybersec conference. Not forgetting that strategic autonomy is much more wider than only cybersecurity. People are now talking about health autonomy, even food autonomy, certainly energy autonomy. Defense autonomy clearly is a natural case, but certainly cybersecurity strategic autonomy is very important. I had the pleasure myself to just complete a report for the Dutch government on this that discusses how can you go about when you want to create more digital autonomy in a sensible way in the field of cybersecurity. So without further ado, I would propose we move into the panel, and it's 5 minutes for Ambassador for Cyber and Technology Affairs of the Security Policy Department of the Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Tadeusz Chomicki, who has quite a career behind him. He was the ambassador, for example, in the Republic of Korea, in China and Mongolia, but also has an academic interest and an academic career. So, Tadeusz, the floor is yours for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. It's going to be a challenge to stick to 5 minutes and also say something concrete and sensible. I start with trivia. We all are facing the cyber threats daily, and we all see that within last year, it's more public that we see it, that these threats are immensely growing in intensity and scope. Therefore, I normally have a feeling that sometimes we shall discuss less and to do more. However, in some areas, such discussions are necessary, and the one taking place today is the case, I think. To undertake concrete actions for enhancing European strategic autonomy, we need to decide not only what it means to us, but for sure it will mean various things by autonomy when we speak about it in Europe, and there's no doubt about it. But we still need to try to operationalize what is the common denominator on which we shall focus our transnational efforts in resources in Europe. And I will not tell you in the next 4 minutes what it is, but I can try to share my personal views on what is more important. Can Europe achieve autonomy, sovereignty, or self-sufficiency in a technological sense? Maybe, but not in the short term. What we can do in the short term, we can try to identify the critical technologies and capabilities where Europe should increase its self-sufficiency, but since it won't happen tomorrow, we shall try to operationalize the notion of trust. Trust. Why? Because since we won't have all needed technological capabilities to ensure Europe's full autonomy in cyberspace in foreseeable time, we will continuously need to rely on non-European partners, suppliers, and resources. Choosing them wisely is of key importance, and therefore the notion of trust is of key importance. Can we operationalize the element of trust? Well, it is already a challenge when we try to do it within our own families. So to do it on the international level of EU relations with external partners is a little bit more demanding task, yet not impossible. A good example perhaps here is the implementation of EU 5G security toolbox, which gives us recommendations on how to increase security in the new technological developments in communication. In Poland, we are currently implementing such recommendations, inter alia, introducing into our national cybersecurity system law a concept of a verified, trusted IT suppliers of product and technologies. I would say that this example can be a one, but this is not building our autonomy yet. This is just increasing our dependency on the third parties which are not trusted. But how to improve our autonomy, how to build our capabilities in the cyberspace? Well, it's a long process. We have in the same time a lot of resources in Europe. We have very good resource in academia. We have in very interesting startups. We have innovative companies, but these resources in Europe are fragmented. They're lacking alignment and a common mission. And there is insufficient level of strategic and sustainable coordination and cooperation between industries, security research, and governments. So what we can do about it? I think that the new incoming EU strategy for digital decade will offer some responses to that. But the one concept that I would like to specifically mention here, and for which I hope, is the European Cybersecurity Industrial Technology and Research Competence Center. I believe this is the way where the European capabilities and cyberspace can be helped, because the center, in our vision, should help and to encourage joint projects from various member states, as well to engage various stakeholders from central and local in administrations, industry, research institutions, academia, NGOs, and of course the private industry. So we hope for the center to create this platform, vertical and horizontal, to bring resources which are in Europe, but they are fragmented, to start building our capabilities in increasing our strategic autonomy. How to do it and what challenges are there, that is probably the topic for the discussion later on. Thank you.
Excellent, Ambassador. I'm very grateful not only that you stuck to the time, but I think you are making this also very concrete. Thank you for that. And I like the wording operationalizing trust, because that has the two elements. Trust has to be there, but operationalizing also points to it. Well, we really will have to do something and be practical about it. Now, my intention is at this moment to switch to the next speaker. That would be Luigi Rebuffi, but I'm not sure whether he is actually connected right now. Perhaps I can get a signal whether Luigi Rebuffi is in the call. Not yet. Okay, so I take the liberty to move on to Liga Rozentale. Liga, if that's okay for you to speak right now. Liga is Senior Director, European Cybersecurity Policy, Microsoft, and also team lead for EU cybersecurity emerging threats. But she also, interestingly, serves as the special advisor to the Latvian mission to the United Nations and a delegate to the UN Open-Ended Working Group on cyber issues. And you just delivered a major document, so congratulations to the people of the UN Open-Ended Working Group. She's also one of the top 50 women in Europe in cybersecurity. Congratulations with that. She has been, and I know Liga from that time too, as the chair of the telecoms and cybersecurity working parties in the council. So Liga, again, 5 minutes for you.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, and hello to all my colleagues on the panel. It's my pleasure to be here once again this year in the online version of the Cybersec Brussels Leaders Forum. Hopefully next year we'll certainly return to the Microsoft Center in Brussels, where this event is traditionally taking place. So I very much look forward to welcoming you there. But okay, we can't predict the future, and I won't make any commitments to next year. Who knows where we'll be? But in any case, so to the topic at hand on strategic autonomy, and representing Microsoft, it's very difficult to separate this issue from digital sovereignty as well. But if you look wider at what these two concepts mean to Europeans in general, it's a very wide concept. Whether you break it down to the strategic autonomy, sovereignty, digital sovereignty, it means very many things to very many people. There was a recent study by the Friedrich Ebert Foundation, and the answers were widely different on if this is a positive or a negative thing. So I think that the message on what we do and the steps we take to realize what the ambitions are in this space are very much essential. So we're talking about more forward-leaning and what can be done. But it's also important to think about the context. The whole conference this morning has been focusing almost more on NATO than the EU. So we can look at it in two different spectrums, either from technology and defense, or technology and development of economy, and what does that mean in different organizations and how it can be addressed. So on the military side, on the NATO side, it's certainly more about self-reliance and the balance of responsibility for military investments. But this also goes into the sector of digital procurement and what that actually means when you're looking at your supply chains, the effect and the vulnerability and the risk management that has to go into making those choices, and how those decisions are made, and what's best nationally for Europe as a region, for the transatlantic zone, and globally as well. So in all, these concepts go more towards responsibility. And whether that's strategic responsibility or digital responsibility, it all falls into the same place. And for every actor, it's significantly different. From my viewpoint, I look at Europe more holistically and look at the Transatlantic Alliance and see how they can fit together in this space. And I think it was a forward-leaning view of the Portuguese presidency currently, and the letter by the heads of state of Germany, Denmark, Finland, and Estonia recently that said that, looking forward on digital sovereignty, and this certainly applies for strategic autonomy as well, is that we have to build on our strengths, reduce strategic weaknesses, and it's not about excluding others or taking a protectionist approach. So how do we do that in a way that makes sense? So we certainly know that we cannot go forward in a vacuum. Anything that we look at, and a technology definitely is a global ecosystem. So how do you fit your national priorities and regional priorities and values into such a system? It's clear that Europe can go forward with a rules-based approach, but as well build on state-of-the-art technology that already exists, rather than trying to develop from zero already global advancements in technology. So this is one way we can go forward. So we have to work also in an eco-space in a multi-stakeholder environment. So with working with companies that fit the values of Europe will be extremely important, and that certainly bolsters also strategic autonomy. It's not necessarily where these businesses come from, but how they approach business. I'm trying to check the time to make sure that I'm within my limits. But I look forward to the questions going forward, because I think we can delve further into how cybersecurity fits into this frame, since we are at the Cybersec conference, and I certainly devote most of my time and efforts at looking how cybersecurity is developing. And we can look at the challenges and the opportunities we have. We certainly have opportunities within a legislative framework with a new administration in the US to look at ways that we can cooperate. And many ways of cooperation have already been stated by previous speakers in earlier panels and keynote speeches, which have been extremely US focused, which is a kind of a nice change after the last few years. But we could always look at what we can learn. I mean, there's no denying that there are attacks ongoing that we have to seriously consider and look at how we can work together between industry and governments to address these in the most efficient and best way, and to learn from these experiences. So I look forward to the engaging discussion, and I'll stop here with introductory points.
Thank you very much, Liga. You're also stressing a number of points. You mentioned values, for example, and also that these are really challenging times. And absolutely, of course, we all know that it is. And your company is very much in the middle of it, and also being part of a global ecosystem. In the global sense, I must say, I very much appreciate that you then have in your background Dutch tulips. Which is part of the things that the Dutch people value very much. And for sure, Bart Groothuis will also value that, because I want to switch to Bart Groothuis, who joined us in this panel. He's a member of European Parliament, and actually a member of the party that just won the elections of yesterday, the Liberal Party, the Party for Freedom and Democracy. Congratulations with that. He's in the European Parliament, a member of the Committee that we know well, and also a substitute member for the Committee for Security and Defense. He has a very strong involvement in the field of cybersecurity, but also disinformation and foreign interference. So all topics that are really, really at the heart of this panel here. So Bart, first of all, thanks that you could join us also fairly last minute. And we are looking forward to your 5 minutes, and it will be 5 minutes, okay?
Thanks,
you.
Paul. And after a short but invigorating night, this is great to be here. I'm still in a mood of victory, and so that's the politicians say, right? To win elections, and we did it. But to get to the core, so many things have been said by the previous speakers, which are so wise. I'd like to just touch on three issues that I think are important if you talk about cybersecurity and digital strategic autonomy, which haven't been touched on that much in the political debate. Some have, some haven't. Let me just start by saying that I was director for cybersecurity in the Dutch Ministry of Defense for the past 7 years before I went to office. And one of the craziest things that I remember from that period was the attacks launched from North Korea by the WannaCry worm, and another one, of course, by NotPetya, a Russian military intelligence sabotage operation which spread across Europe. And I remember every time sitting there in a situation room, what to do about it. How can we guard ourselves against such threats? The harbour of Rotterdam was hit severely. 300 million euros of damage was estimated, and it was such severeness. But we had, from the cyber security threat intelligence community, we had an idea of which command and control servers were being used. And just knowing that you have the information, but you do not have a capability to stop the attack, that was frustrating. So I'd like to, as a politician now, use that experience and try to get that into the Brussels bubble by saying we need DNS that protects us, right? We need, just like CERT-BE here in Belgium did with Belnet, an internet service provider, they made an agreement saying if we would see malware like NotPetya or like WannaCry calling back in order to establish itself on a machine or system or network, we need to not resolve that traffic, right? That is what the Belgians are doing here, and they are leading in Europe. That's a leading example. And I think that we should do that for the entirety of Europe. Now, a second thing, like you said, I'm not just into cybersecurity. I'm also into the threat of hybrid threats, foreign interference, espionage, but also digital sabotage, hybrid foreign interference. Now, let me just say that we are not sovereign in a space where I want Europe to be sovereign in the future. And that is, for example, if you would say that a WannaCry worm or from North Korea or Russia would hit a certain country again, and you would want to put countermeasures in place, then a country that is being hit can do that, right? And if, for example, Russia would intervene in the elections in a Baltic state, then the Baltic state might respond with unfriendly measures. But the Netherlands, for example, or Belgium or Italy can't. That's the international state liability law, how it's currently written. And I think that is way, way, way overdue. What we should be working on is saying we have the right to collectively defend ourselves. And we have the right to collectively say we want collective countermeasures in Europe. We should be one bloc addressing hybrid threats, making sure that we are one bloc, like a sovereign bloc addressing these hybrid threats with countermeasures. And that is something that it should start in Europe, but it doesn't have to end there. We could also involve NATO, we could involve the US or Japan or Korea, but it needs to be a democratic, liberal bloc of countries who say we have the right to defend ourselves. Now, the third thing I'd like to mention then is if you say we want the right to defend ourselves, against whom? We need to attribute, right? If we have 27 countries trying to attribute any attack, that would be a strategic mistake. I think that we need 4 or 5 countries inside the European Union bolstering their attribution capabilities, their offensive cyber capabilities, and making sure that we have a capability as an EU and make sure that we have it, use it for the entirety of the EU. So I think that a couple of competent security services and intelligence services inside the EU should join a front, should form a front, and make sure that we have that capability so that we can have collective countermeasures. And whenever we see something in the wild, we as the EU on a DNS level can guard ourselves against such attacks. Now, I see the last 5 seconds of my introduction, and I'd like to thank you for inviting me, and I'm very much looking forward to your questions, if you have any. Yeah, cheers.
Thank you very much, Mr. Groothuis. I think this is really super interesting and very challenging because, I mean, what you put on the table on the one hand connects probably closely to EU policy, and Lorena can talk about that in a minute, what the European Commission is proposing. But on the other hand, it may also put on a sharp edge the collaboration in Europe, if you're talking about coalitions of the willing, for example, or Counter-Strike and those kind of things. But nevertheless, you see, we are really here in a very, very relevant debate. I think I am asking the regie, but I think that Luigi Rebuffi, has he been able to join? Because if not, I rather propose that we go on, and we can then still see if he can join in the course of this session, and we'll give him the floor. So I prefer rather than now to move on to Lorena Boix Alonso, the Director for Digital Society, Trust and Cybersecurity at DG Connect at the European Commission. Lorena has been recently nominated. Before that time, she was Acting Director for Policy Strategy in DG Connect, but she has also extensive experience at the more, as you would say in the European Commission, the more political level, which is the level of the cabinets and the commissioners, as Deputy Head of Cabinet of Vice President Neelie Kroes at the time. And she has extensive experience and education in the field of law, being a lawyer and a degree from Harvard Law School. And I'm very pleased that we have Lorena here, because ages ago I actually was her predecessor. So I'm very happy to see Lorena taking here the floor. Lorena, your 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Paul. Don't put so much pressure. You were an amazing predecessor. I'll try to be really at the level. Nice to see Bart again. Congratulations. Pity I don't see Luigi, and nice to meet the other colleagues. Let me try to very briefly explain what is meant by these concepts. As Liga said, there are many ways to define them. I think that at the origin of this context, concepts of technological sovereignty, digital autonomy, whatever, we have so many different ways, is a recognition that has been even reinforced by COVID, that digital connectivity and digital technologies have become critical. They are basically at the origin of everything. And if we don't protect them, if we are not leaders, as we say, on them, the consequences are on the economy, on the society, are on everything. This is why it becomes so important that Europe becomes sovereign in digital technologies. But what does it mean? From my point of view, it has three main elements that apply also to the cyber field. One is that we need to build our own capacity. So we need in Europe to have robust digital capacities, services, and infrastructure, which means that we need money, of course. Second, that we need a strong regulatory framework, which is in accordance to our values. And third, we need an international dimension. As has been mentioned, we cannot deal with this alone, because it's a global issue. In the field of cybersecurity, these three elements are there as well. You need, first of all, to build very robust cybersecurity capacities, and for that, indeed, in Europe, we are trying to build them. As you may know, we have quadruple, if that word exists, the amount of investment. We are now proposing 4.5 billion. I know that Biden announced 9 billion. Okay, we are taking this more seriously than in the past. We want to invest in our security operation centers and to network them if possible. We are trying to use, or our member states are trying to use, the money from the Recovery and Resilience Facility, precisely in part to invest it in strengthening cybersecurity capabilities. We have created this cybersecurity, the ambassador mentioned it, Technology Research Competence Center that will try to build capacities by covering all the supply chain from research up to deployment. So this is also very important. And of course, to build our capacity to react with a joint cyber unit. So this, as far as building capacities, we need the second element as well in cyber, which is the law, our regulatory framework. And here I would insist that this is our way to do things. We have principles and we try to follow them. Here we, as you know, we are going to reinforce the NIS directive. A very important element, and it has been mentioned by Liga, is the supply chain. And every time I talk about the NIS directive, about our proposal, I mention those articles that deal with the reinforcement of the supply chain, of, as Liga was saying, making sure with whom are you dealing with, because the consequences are for everybody. Also very important to have rules on our products. And I think, and this was mentioned by the ambassador, a very good element of how we want to follow our rules approach, our rules-based approach is the 5G toolbox. Indeed, other parts of the world may deal with the risks posed by 5G. Suppliers sometimes are in a different way. We have our toolbox that takes into account technical considerations and non-technical considerations, and that brings to measures that are technical and also that are strategic. But we follow an approach that then applies the same to everybody, and this is very important. The third dimension is the international dimension, as I was saying before. On the one hand, this means applying this rules-based approach in the international field, and I think that what Bart was saying about attribution is very important, so that if things happens, there has to be a consequence. So there has to be an attribution, and there has to be, if we follow the cyber diplomacy toolbox, has to be sanctions sometimes. So that at the end of the day, this is not just a normal thing to happen. No, this should not happen, and it has to be dealt with. Very important. And of course, as was mentioned also by some colleagues, the international dimension means also dealing with our like-minded colleagues in the global world. And here, again, we need to cooperate with those that follow our same approach, because as I was saying, this is something well, we need to act together. I think I've done my 5 minutes. Happy to continue later.
Yeah, we will certainly come back to you, Lorena, because actually you connect excellently also to the other speakers, and with agreements, and I also think with some disagreements potentially. So we'll get to that. But before we do that, I'm very glad that I see Luigi on the screen, who managed to connect. Digital world. In the end, we do get connected. Luigi Rebuffi, you're going to get 5 minutes. Luigi is the Secretary General, founder of the European Cybersecurity Organization. He has worked in industry, in THALES, but also a long time at the European level, CEO and founder of the European Organization for Security, EOS, the initiator also of the public-private partnership with the European Commission on European Cybersecurity, initiator of ECSO, the European Cybersecurity Organization. And as I said, he is now also the Secretary General of that. Luigi, we are a bit short of time, so if you can stick to the 5 minutes, very much appreciated, and I hope you are fully ready to go. There you go.
Thank you, Paul. Good morning, everybody. I'm sorry for the delay.
We have no sound.
My problem with the internet,
Luigi,
and actually my connection
we have no
is
sound.
not as good as... Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm sorry. So I said, you see, it's some problem with the internet. So let me say very quickly, I am... So as you said, I'm with ECSO, the European Public-Private Partnership on Cybersecurity with Commission. And we've seen in these 5 years that public-private cooperation is fundamental when talking about strategic autonomy, because Europe cannot be fully autonomous, and we need to bring together resources by the private sectors. So strategic autonomy, we are discussing with you, Paul, for years now, should be seen as a capability to develop and master certain strategic technology, products, and services. But the point is that today we are asking ourselves, what is strategic? So I don't want to go back to all discussions. And I suppose you have already spoke. I just heard Lorena speaking about 5G, but there's also cloud security, the internet, as we've seen how much strategic is just to participate in this kind of events. But we don't have the full picture, what is really strategic for Europe, what is strategic for our member states. We know some elements, but we don't have the full picture. And even if we maybe somebody knows a part of it, I suppose that not everybody is ready to give away the secrets of what is strategic. So I don't know. I don't know if you can still hear me.
You can continue.
So we better understand what is strategic for Europe, and what are the capabilities we have today already, what are missing, and this should turn to sorry, Paul?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Can you repeat?
Yeah, the sound is rather broken up.
Hopefully me. So we have to understand what we have to understand what we have and what we are missing. Yeah, that's through the phone. Very good indeed. It's not working apparently today here at the office. So we have to understand what we are missing, better understand to invest the resources we have, and so we have this filter on autonomy, but that we can. So we have this with what we many times we discuss about sovereignty, where member states and they have to apply law and decide what is trusted and what is not. So we cannot do everything in Europe. We have to buy something outside, and then the filter will be through economics. What the private sector is going to invest to develop its autonomy, and what the public administration are ready to recognize as trusted because of strategic interest from the country, but also because working with the allies, with trusted allies. And this is, for me, we have to understand this for the future if you really want to invest appropriately the money. We have the problem also that we see the investment from the public administration, European Commission in this direction, but the decision today, it looks like the decision are taking as if cybersecurity is a traditional security market. No, the market for police, for border control, while cybersecurity is a market which is a large majority linked to the private sector. So if the public administration, the public sector wants to have a contribution to grow its autonomy and have also the investment from the private sector, I think it's important to take decision on future investment to grow the strategic autonomy with a better cooperation, with a better link between the public and the private, and not only taking decision on investment from the public sector because, let me say, sovereignty issues. So this is my point for the future, really continue the public-private cooperation with a filter on strategic autonomy and with the support from public administration for higher sovereignty.
Thank you very much, Luigi. And despite the fact that the connection was sometimes a bit broken up, you actually managed to make an excellent link back to what the ambassador also mentioned about having to make choices for what is really critical. And I would say I actually dare not only the panelists but also the audience come up with a list of the 10 people, the 10 technologies or 10 capabilities that you think are really, really strategic, that you need, really so critical that you need to have them in your own hand. And then imagine that you cannot do all 10, but you only have money for 3 of them. What are the 3 of them? And I think we still are in the process of defining that clearly. Now, time is a bit short, and I wanted to ask each of the panelists to answer at least one of the questions we had in a preparatory discussion, which is very much kind of if we are talking about like-minded parties, with whom can we collaborate or not collaborate. And there is a new situation in the transatlantic dimension, the change towards the Biden administration. And some people would say, of course, the United States is our natural ally. Some would say, well, we are above the United States because we are really global. Others may say, no, it's actually a rival. Others will have an even more contested view of the United States. I want to ask you, what do you think about the transatlantic cooperation in particular? Of course, in strategic autonomy, but in particular in the view that perhaps in 4 years' time we will have another administration. No, perhaps in 2 years' time, because we have elections. There may be a difference in the United States already. So how do we go about in the transatlantic relationship and have something that is sustainable? I would like to start with the ambassador.
Thank you, Paul. This is a tricky question for diplomat, but let me say that I am working in my Polish foreign ministry with the currently 13th foreign minister. I've worked with through the 14th changes of the head of my ministry. So, and I also served, as you mentioned in the introduction, 6 years as an ambassador to China, 5 years as an ambassador to Korea. So my perspective is a long-term perspective. In the long-term perspective, we have to make some assessments on with whom we want to work closer. And on that part, I would say I'm very dedicated to supporting the idea of building European self-sufficiency, self-independence, self-autonomy, depending on what context we are talking about. But this must be done wisely. And I said it is not technically possible in a short time, but it's also not needed in a long time. Because eventually we will always use some elements of the systems or components, or will depend on supplies from partners. So the question is, who is the trusted partner? And there are different ways to verify it. I say there's technical aspect and there is a value aspect. The director has mentioned that before. So Lorena has mentioned that before. The technical aspect can be written into operationalization of our law and regulations, and this is happening. The non technical aspect is a question of trust and long term. Well, we have values, and these values are somehow dividing us or making us closer to some and less close to the others. So in the long term, I think we share not only values with within the transatlantic relations, but we also share the need to protect our own values in the long term. For that reason, at least, I think whatever we do to enhance our autonomy, it should not be done against transatlantic relations, not against the transatlantic relations. And one more thing. The administration, and if we focus on American administration, this is one thing. I mean, it's changing, but as I said at the beginning, we have to have a long-term perspective. In the long-term perspective, I personally believe that the values of the American administration and the values ruling the Europe here will be more or less aligned and similar. So I'm not that much worried about it in a longer time perspective. But the government's cooperation was thing, and the practicality of cyberspace also depends on the companies. So when it comes to the companies, not that I have not in Microsoft and our dear colleague here, I'm using it all the time, both at work and in my personal life. But in general, companies are set up to run businesses for the profits and not for the values. So they may be, to different degree, run by the values, and this is the good. There are a lot of good examples, including the one we are having here today in this panel with us. But in a longer time perspective, we should be also in Europe less dependent on the third-party supplies, not because we don't trust them, but because we should apply. In reality, we should apply the saying of one of the greatest politicians of the 20th century, Vladimir Comrade Lenin. He said, "Doверяй, но проверяй." Trust but verify. That was picked up by President Reagan in the nuke talks later between Soviet Union and the US.
Okay.
But this is a saying that yes, we trust, but we have to verify. And more on technical
Ambassador,
side, but also
yeah, thank you very much for that. I mean, we have another good slogan here, operational trust, and then you also give us trust and verify. Lorena, that must appeal to you. Lorena, what's your take on the transatlantic?
Well, for me, it's an easy question because the Commission happened to adopt a communication in December on how we see the transatlantic agenda with the US, and setting very clearly that it's not only about bilateral cooperation, but that it's an opportunity, of course, to make a new transatlantic agenda for global cooperation that is based on common values. I think that is, whatever the administration, it's clear that the United States and the EU are each other's top trading partners. So I think that it's normal that we need to have a specific dialogue with the US on how to strengthen our technological and industrial leadership. So I think that this is something that we have said, that we have mentioned. It is clear that whatever the administration in place, the race for technological supremacy is here to stay. It's a global race. And we will need to work together to mutually reinforce common priorities and common interests and values, and certainly a common interest is to have a secure cyberspace.
Yeah, thank you. Liga, perhaps two questions in this for you. I mean, transatlantic and of course also as a private sector actor. So imagine the US administration changes again and we get America first and those kind of things. Perhaps that also happens in Europe, you never know. What is the role of the private sector to achieve what Lorena just said, a secure, stable and safe cyberspace?
Okay, there are extremely many things that we can still work on for a secure, stable cyberspace. I'll try to reflect on some of the things, the discussions, and take your question into consideration, Paul. One thing that I wanted to note that Luigi raised a very important point in these discussions and asking what is strategic and what does that mean for all the actors. As we look at relationships throughout the EU or the transatlantic relationship, what is it that we want to protect? And it's physical infrastructure, digital infrastructure, and our common values in one sense. So this goes into many different directions on how I think that we should cooperate, regardless of the administration that sits in the White House. I think that at least in one sense, we have a much more historical relationship between the US and Europe that we can reflect on, that still has some constants that we can rely on throughout various changes in administration, both in Europe and in the US. So hopefully that takes some precedence and that can be fit into this relationship. And I think that there have been steps taken by both sides in order to ensure that this relationship can grow closer, taking into consideration various different positions. There's a few things that I wanted to identify from what's been said. When you look at Okay, on trusted partnerships, I think that it's true that companies are driven by profits, but luckily it's much more profitable to be a trusted company at this point. If you're not trusted for your privacy and your cybersecurity concerns, then you're not going to be profitable anymore. And one more thing as well, looking at the transatlantic relationship from my other hat in the open-ended work at the UN, is looking at, without a transatlantic alliance, the norms and values that Europe and US hold in common cannot be defended. The US and Europe together are in a minority globally when these issues are addressed at the UN level. So maintaining that partnership and respecting each other's sovereignty in that partnership is essential for looking at these issues from the aspect of promoting and protecting democracy.
That's very, very helpful, and that gives also a broad framing. Yet I want to put it a bit to the test with Bart, because for sure, I guess you are in favor of a transatlantic partnership. At the same time, I heard you recently talking rather critical about what US-based companies are doing in terms of control of information, essentially. Disinformation, taking down information on the internet, etc., etc. So how do you look at this kind of balance, respecting sovereignty, as Liga just says, in a transatlantic relationship, assuming there are common values? Are there common values? Do we respect sovereignty in that?
Yes, there's common values, of course, but there's no permanent allies, like you said, only permanent interests, like someone said. But let me just go against the stream here, just like Liga just did. The US has permanent interest in the EU, and the EU has permanent interest in the US. We have security guarantees from the US. We can't replace them with our own capabilities here when it comes to defense and security. There's trade, like Lorena said. There's values, like Liga said, in the UN. But let me just also reiterate, it's pretty weird if we would say we need a European Microsoft, we need a European Facebook, or we need a European HP or Dell or Cisco. That will not happen. What I think that will happen and must happen is also what Commissioner Breton has set out, is looking at what comparative advantage do we have in this data space, like you mentioned, Paul. And that is, I think, in the data space for industries, for example. The American platforms are mainly business to consumer, right? Their technology, their security, but also their functionality is mainly on data from consumers. But there's a huge potential. I mean, a huge potential. It has the GDP of Spain right now. If you would monetize the data that is currently available inside industries and data. I'm a member of the industry committee, and what I think that Europe could do is set for itself a goal towards using the comparative advantage that we have in monetizing, using data free flow of industry data inside Europe. That is a comparative advantage we can actually monetize and make worth, that we set the standards here worldwide, also in the US, and that our companies profit from that. And that is a way that we could do trade. They do the consumers, we do the industry, but both will be happy with it.
Yeah, and that's for sure an issue, a real strategic autonomy issue, to have that strength in industrial data. Be strong at home, you can be strong in the world. Luigi, I will come to you in a minute, but I first want to check with Michal if there are any question, or a single question perhaps, Michal, who is the overall coordinator and organizer here, from the chat.
Can you hear me, Paul?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes, great. Sorry for that. So I can see a couple of questions about, just pick the first one that was asked, and the question goes, it is relatively easy to understand what digital strategic autonomy means in terms of internal policies. So like having the buzzing digital industry that is able to give you whatever technologies you need, so you don't have to rely on others. But does digital strategic autonomy, what does digital strategic autonomy mean in the external context, in the context of external European policies?
Yeah. That's a quite interesting one, and perhaps Luigi can just address that also from his perspective of the private-public partnership, because for sure you are also confronted there with the question of how do you do this internationally? If you do it in Europe, how do you work with partners internationally? Luigi, would you mind addressing briefly that international aspect of your type of collaboration, industry collaboration? Let's see, Luigi. Yeah. Luigi, your sound. Yeah.
It's okay. No, I can.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. It's quite a sensitive question, because when you look at from the private sector view, the private sector want to make business. Has been said, it goes with profit. So trusted partners for the private sector are those who are allow the companies to make money for a long period. So they're trusted, wherever they're coming. then the private sector has to deal with the public administration, say, but you have to work with those trusted allies which are coming from outside Europe. And so there is this international relationship which is linking strategic issues linked to national security to economic issues for a global market like cybersecurity is. So, of course, when we are looking at the increased strategic autonomy at global level, we have to, the private sector in Europe is developing components, products, and so on that will be used internally, but also exported outside at the global level. And I think, as seen from the private sector, the important thing that we could develop in the future is the reciprocity on being dependent. I mean, we can be dependent in Europe on certain technology and certain issues, and limit somehow our strategic autonomy because we cannot do everything, but at the same time we can develop certain products which can be exported to, let's say, friend countries, and they can be dependent on us. So somehow we are, maybe it's an ideal concept, but it's a way where we could build up stronger, let's say, international cooperation.
Thank you very much. I see that Bart will have to leave us. I still want to, Bart, if you have 5 seconds, what is the key word that you say has not been said, should be said here?
Well, the one thing I learned in the past 8 years in government, in office, was that execution actually is the strategy. It's not about abstract notions of where we want to go and where we want to land. It's the execution where you can really make a difference in the world, and where you could say we are leading in this world. It's not the best ideas, it's the best practices, and that is what we can do, and we should enable the entirety of Europe to do exactly that. And building the NIS directive, that's what I currently do as a rapporteur in European Parliament. I would also like to see that countries would not just look at it, but actually execute what is in it. The best plans and the best ideas should be followed up with the best execution. Thanks.
I think that's a very encouraging word, but I do want to give the other panelists, I know Bart, you will have to leave, also the opportunity to say, well, what is the one thing that either you really want to stress now, or you say this has not been said, this has to be stressed. Luigi, from your side, what is an important thing that we should absolutely know?
That the let's say the strategic autonomy, as I said, it's something which should be defined. That if you are looking for a global approach at European level, it's very, very challenging, because if you discuss in the West Europe and East Europe, the definition of what could be strategic is very likely different. So I think the effort made by the European Commission and also by organizations like ECSO, like the one I'm running, it could be very important in getting together the different stakeholders and defining what is strategic and reduce this kind of fragmentation, which we could also lead to a dispersion of the limited resources we have.
So to get on one page and be more aligned. Liga, for you.
I could just close on addressing supply chain. Supply chain is a list of components that are physical or digital, but it's also building the trust that's necessary to make those products and services work for everybody in the digital ecosystem. So continued partnership, continued cooperation can't be repeated enough.
Yeah, and that brings us in a sense back to the ambassador. So what is the kind of the key word you would like to stress out of this discussion?
Well, we discussed trust, but also cooperation. As I was saying, cooperation on the European level, but the cooperation which is enhanced by the funds and is enhanced by the rules. Rules which will prevent ruthless biology. What I mean here, the rules which will prevent smaller companies, smaller research centers to be eaten by bigger and stronger centers, because I believe the power of responding to the cyber threats and the cyber challenges is in a variety, and we need variety. So we need the smaller companies to exist, but we need them also to be supported. So the European rules to encourage cooperation between big and smaller partners, but in the same time protecting the smaller from being eaten, is one of the key solutions for the future, I believe.
Again, a very, very interesting word. Thank you very much, Ambassador. And I give the last word on a keyword that we should not forget to Lorena.
In fact, I'm going to cheat and I'm going to build a sentence with the keywords of each of you. So I will say that we need action together, all across the supply chain under common rules. That's what I would say to close.
Well, that I think is very, very nice. I mean, and I probably you can make an argument that this is one of the elements in the NIS2 directive and in the cyber strategy. So I would like to very much thank the panel. A bit of an apology too that we could not take more questions from the chat, but you know how it is in these kind of online sessions. They are nevertheless very enriching. And once more, I feel very honored that I can be in your company. I had the privilege to moderate this session. I hope we take something away from this for also real action, because it's urgent that we get our mind around strategic autonomy and especially the actions that we can take for the benefit, in particular, of course, Europe and citizens, but actually also in the global interest. So thank you very much again. Thank you very much also to Cybersec Forum to offer this opportunity to discuss this important topic. And I get back to Michael. I think we are going to go for a break. Thank you.